Hello. Today we're in Portsmouth, the home of the Royal Navy. And it's Remembrance Sunday, a very special day, made more poignant this year by the events of the Gulf War. But for Portsmouth, November is also a month for celebrations. In 3 weeks' time, Her Majesty the Queen Mother comes here to attend the opening of the extension to the city's Anglican Cathedral. And we'll be making a special visit to it in today's programme. War is a time when everyone's faith is tested. And so we'll begin here at Nelson's flagship Victory with John Bunyan's famous hymn of dedication, resolve to be a pilgrim.
He who would valiantly gains all disaster, let him in constancy so beset him round with dismal stories, do but themselves confound, his strength the more is. No foe shall stay his might, though he with giants fight. He will make good his right to be a pilgrim. Since, Lord, thou dost defend us with thy spirit, we know we at the end shall life inherit. Then fancies fly away, I'll fear not what men say.
The huge natural harbour at Portsmouth has been a safe haven for ships since Saxon times. Name any famous British ship, and the chances are she sailed from here. The Ark Royal, Mary Rose, the Hood, and in more recent times the Sheffield, which was one of the many ships that sailed to the Falklands from here. In fact, over the years, the people of Portsmouth have had to get used to receiving bad news, and many families here know at first hand the grief and loss that war brings. In all these years of naval history, there have been two landmarks that greeted sailors on their return to Pompey. One is the Round Tower, started by Henry V in 1417, which stands right at the harbour mouth. The other is this church building. For centuries, the lantern at the top of the cupola was one of the first things a ship's crew would recognise on the horizon as they came home. Originally, this was a parish church. Then in 1927, it was chosen to become Portsmouth's cathedral. The trouble was, it wasn't big enough, so they started to extend it. But the Second World War interrupted the work, and so a temporary wall was put up at the west end. The project was restarted in 1986, and now it's finished. With me is the site manager, Ted Andrews. Ted, you can hardly see the join, can you?
I'm glad you like it, Sir Harry. That's true. It's very, very true.
How difficult was it to match up the stonework?
We were very lucky here, insofar that we were able to marry bricklayers who we taught to lay stone, namely this sort of stone, and we had skilled masons, which in fact laid the dress stone. And as you see, you can see how we've married the two together.
Ted, what was the most difficult part of building here?
The difficult part was the fact the cathedral is always in use.
But There's something special about this cathedral for you, isn't there?
I was not confirmed when I came here, and I felt here was a place, here I felt at home, everybody around me were great. It was necessary for me to step from the darkness, if you like, into the light and move to the other side, and I became confirmed, and that was very important to me, and that was really what became so special to me.
You confirmed in the cathedral, yeah?
It was indeed. The first person confirmed on the completed cathedral.
The provost of the cathedral is the very Reverend David Stancliffe. Hello, David. They tell me you've got the best job in the Church of England, is that right?
Well, I think it is probably. We've got a marvellous parish, and we're one of the only cathedrals that has a rail parish with people living round. And then, as you can see, we've just about got a rail cathedral too.
It must be very exciting to see it all finished.
Yes, that's wonderful, because that's the end of 8 years' work just here, but of course many, many more years of indecision, and to actually have got the thing done now is wonderful.
Thanks very much, David. And now it's time to go and have a look around inside. The Hampshire County Youth Orchestra is going to play for us part of Sir Henry Wood's Fantasia on British Sea Songs. This is a cathedral with very strong naval links. But to meet today's Navy, I've come to the dockyard to meet an old friend, Commander Adrian Nance of the Cardiff. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too, Harry.
Last time we met was just before Christmas down the Gulf, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a very busy time for us all.
You were on board the Sheffield during the Falklands conflict, and a lot of your lads were lost. How do you cope with that?
The tragedy of losing 20 people was something that affected the ship's company an enormous amount, as you can imagine. But because it was the first conflict for a little while, I think we had to learn, each of us individually, how to cope with that. And certainly that was the effect that it had on me. And from a Christian point of view, I think the tragedy is the greater, the loss of life, but also the potential for the future of the Christian faith also has a very important part to play in coping with that situation.
How important is prayer to you?
Prayer is very important. I've been extremely fortunate in both the conflict situations that I've been in, of being prayed for a lot. I value that enormously, and I think it has a very important part to play in easing the mind and exercising one's faith to make sure that an uncertain future can be coped with in the best way that you possibly can.
If you like watching ships, then Portsmouth is hard to beat. The Gosport ferry runs across the harbour all day. There's the Isle of Wight ferry, and nowadays Portsmouth is a big cross-channel ferry port as well. And of course, there are the huge naval vessels. On July the 19th, 1545, one of the ships that set out from Portsmouth was the Mary Rose. The pride of Henry VIII's fleet, she sank just 3 or 4 miles offshore. Most of her crew drowned. Many were trapped between decks. The raising of the Mary Rose is one of the great historical achievements of our time. After 400 years at the bottom of the sea, she was brought to the surface in 1982. I've had the pleasure and privilege of being president of the Friends of the Mary Rose Trust for over a couple of years now. And so it's a delight to meet an old friend, director of the project, Dr. Margaret Rule. Lovely to see you again, Margaret.
Lovely to be here with you, Harry.
Now, you had to learn to dive because of this project, didn't you?
Oh, that's a long time ago. That's over 20 years, when the Mary Rose was still totally beneath the mud. So in 1971, when the first time we saw the timbers protruding from the mud, fortunately I could dive. Wouldn't it have been maddening if I couldn't?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, can you describe the ship from the hull you got here?
Yes, we have just over half of the ship. She stands as high as a 4-story building and is half as long as a football pitch, so it's a massive piece of Tudor woodwork.
Yes.
It was really like a Pompeii underwater. Magnificent opportunity. And so now we're preserving the hull, and in our museum we have the objects, and we want people to understand how people lived and worked on the ship over 430 years ago.
The fascinating thing about the Mary Rose is that they found so many of the crew's personal effects safely buried in the mud. In the exhibition hall, I've arranged to meet Sue Green, one of the conservation team. Now, a lot of things have to be reconstructed. That must be very difficult.
Yes, it can be, yes. It's not something that you can actually just do. You can't just presume that a certain thing goes back a certain way. You have to put a lot of thought into it.
I see with a rosary there. How long does that take to reconstruct?
Well, to reconstruct, I wouldn't say it would take too long, really. Maybe a day, a couple of hours, maybe a day.
But it's the preservation of it.
But the preservation, yes, could take anything from a year, 2, 3 years. It depends entirely on the object itself, how degraded it is.
How do you feel to handle these personal things from such a long time ago?
I must admit, it does feel rather special now. The larger things you do tend to dismiss, especially like the very large like guns that we see around us and the gun carriages. But I do tend to get a little blasé about it. We do get many people who come in who are absolutely fascinated at seeing such a variety of things. But I do like the personal things, obviously like the rosaries.
Thanks for talking to us, Sue.
Thank you.
And now as we think of all those men lost at sea, not only in the Mary Rose, but in many ships over many years, we return to the cathedral where the choir are going to sing for us, Never Weather-Beaten Sail. For many, Remembrance Sunday is a day of pride. For others, it's a day for sad memories. The Reverend Ron Robertson is a local clergyman who's found that his ministry involves the families of service personnel killed in action. Ron, unfortunately, on many occasions, there's no body left to mourn over. What happens then?
Well, when there isn't a body, we obviously have to find ways of bringing back that stage as far as we are able for people. And certainly when men were killed in the Falklands, in my own parish, where we had 7 men who were killed, we had services, funeral services in the church, and the families brought their own flowers, and we laid them on the floor where the coffin would have been. And in a way, brought as close as possible a funeral service where people can reflect on that person and begin to establish a realization in their mind that somebody has died. Now later, of course, with some lobbying, those people were taken back down to the South Atlantic, where those men were buried. This enables them to go back and sometimes stops that searching, the searching that goes on, wondering, is it true? Did they die?
It's a focus for the grief.
It's a focus, and they then are able to mutter, think through, and perhaps it puts to rest those anxieties that have lingered for so long.
How do you see the Christian message of hope in death?
The Christian message says that there is this life, and that this life continues into a life which is far better. And if we look at the book of Revelation, it has a wonderful phrase there which says that in that life there is no death, no grief, no crying, and no pain. And that would be the Christian message of hope that we would try and give to people as something that they can begin to look to as they build up their memories in this life.
Thanks for talking to us, Ron. In a minute, we'll be going back to the cathedral for Highway's own act of remembrance and a prayer before we close with another hymn of strength and confidence, O God, our help in ages past. But first, with all those who've lost someone in war in mind, here is a beautiful American spiritual, Going Home.
Going home, I'm a-going home. Quiet like some still day, I'm just going home. It's not far, just close by, through an open door. Work all done, care laid by, gone to fear no more. Mother's there expecting me, father's waiting too. Lots of folk gathered there, all the friends I knew. All the friends I knew. Nothing lost holds gain, no more fret nor pain, no more stumbling on the way, no more longing for the day, gone to roam no more. Morning star lights the way, restless dreams all done, shadows gone, break of day, real life just begun. There's no break, there's no end, just a living on, wide awake with a smile, going on and on. Going home, I'm just going it's not far, just close by, through an open door. I'm just going home.
Blessed are all thy saints, O God and King, who have travelled over the tempestuous sea of this mortal life, and have made the harbour of peace and felicity. Watch over us who are still in our dangerous voyage. Frail is our vessel, and the ocean is wide. Bring us at length to the quiet haven of our heart's desire, where thou, O God, art blessed, and livest and reignest for ever and ever. Amen.
Well, we've come to the end of our Remembrance Sunday highway from Portsmouth. Our thanks to all those in the Cathedral and in the Navy who've helped with the programme. Next week, highway comes from Falmouth down in Cornwall. I'll see you then.
we received this call from